What if humanity solved every problem that has haunted civilization for thousands of years? Imagine a world without hunger, without war, without disease. A world where no one has to struggle for food, shelter, or survival, where every basic need is provided. It sounds like paradise. Many people believe that if scarcity disappeared, humanity would finally create the perfect society. More than 50 years ago, one scientist decided to test that idea. He built a miniature world where every physical need was satisfied. There were no predators, no famine, no disease. Food and water were always available. Every mouse had a safe place to live. At first, everything worked exactly as expected. The population grew. The colony flourished. Life seemed almost perfect. But within a few years, that paradise collapsed. Not because of starvation, not because of disease, and not because of any outside threat. Instead, the society destroyed itself from within. Eventually, every single mouse was dead. The experiment became known as Universe 25, and many people have since described it as an experiment that predicted humanity's future. But did it really? To answer that question, we need to begin with the scientist behind the experiment.
The story starts in the 1960s. American ethologist John B. Calhoun had spent years studying how animal populations behaved under different conditions. One question fascinated him more than any other. If every struggle for survival disappeared, what would happen to society? Throughout history, animals had always lived under constant pressure. Food could become scarce. Predators hunted them. Disease spread through populations. Competition determined who survived and who reproduced. These challenges shaped the way every species evolved. But what if those pressures no longer existed? Would a population continue growing forever? Would conflict disappear? Or would entirely new problems emerge? Calhoun believed the only way to find out was through a carefully controlled experiment. So he built what appeared to be a perfect paradise.
The enclosure was designed to eliminate nearly every danger a mouse would face in the wild. The temperature remained comfortable year-round. Food and fresh water were available at all times. Nesting materials were constantly supplied. The mice were protected from predators, disease, and harsh weather. In theory, the habitat could support several thousand animals without running out of resources. There was only one limitation. The mice could never leave. Everything they would ever experience would happen inside this enclosed world. At the time, that didn't seem like a serious problem. After all, why would anyone want to leave a place that offered everything they needed?
When the experiment officially began, only 8 healthy mice were placed inside. 4 males, 4 females. They had never met before. None of them had established territories. Each entered the enclosure with the same opportunity to build a new life. During the first few weeks, everything unfolded exactly as expected. The mice explored their surroundings, they built nests, they found mates. Soon, the first litters were born. Without predators or food shortages, almost every pup survived. The colony expanded rapidly. Generation after generation, the population continued to grow. To outside observers, Universe 25 appeared to be a remarkable success. It looked like proof that a society could flourish once every basic need was guaranteed. But beneath the surface, subtle changes had already begun. The paradise was becoming more crowded. And before long, those small changes would transform the colony in ways no one had anticipated.
As the population continued to grow, the colony entered a new stage. There was still unlimited food, plenty of water, no predators, no disease. Nothing about the physical environment had changed. Yet the behavior of the mice slowly began to change. Although resources were abundant, not every part of the enclosure was equally desirable.
Some nesting areas offered better protection and easier access to food. The strongest males claimed these locations and defended them aggressively. In the wild, weaker mice could simply leave and establish territories elsewhere. Inside Universe 25, they had no such option. The enclosure was a closed world. Every defeated mouse remained trapped alongside the winners. As the population became denser, competition intensified. More and more males lost their territories. Without a place to defend, they also lost their place in the colony's social hierarchy. Some became increasingly aggressive, attacking other mice for no obvious reason. Others wandered through the enclosure without any clear purpose. Fights became more frequent. Injuries became common. Yet none of this was caused by hunger. Food was still available everywhere. The problem was no longer a lack of resources. It was the breakdown of the colony's social structure.
Not every mouse reacted the same way. While some became more violent, others responded in the opposite direction. Instead of competing, they withdrew from society almost entirely. They spent most of their time eating, sleeping, and grooming themselves. Their fur remained clean and almost flawless because they rarely fought. They showed little interest in defending territory. They avoided conflict whenever possible, and they rarely attempted to mate. Calhoun gave these mice a memorable name, the Beautiful Ones. The name referred to their perfect appearance, but beneath that appearance was something deeply troubling. These mice had abandoned nearly every normal social behavior. They no longer competed, they no longer reproduced, they no longer contributed to the colony. They simply existed. To Calhoun, the Beautiful Ones represented a society in retreat. They had chosen comfort over participation, safety over responsibility, survival as individuals over the future of the population. As their numbers increased, the colony became noticeably quieter, less active, less social. It still looked healthy from the outside, but the behaviors that held the society together were slowly disappearing.
The changes didn't stop with the males. Female mice also began behaving differently. Some mothers abandoned their pups shortly after birth. Others failed to build proper nests. In some cases, mothers even attacked their own young. As a result, more and more pups died before reaching adulthood. Those that survived grew up in an increasingly unstable environment. Many never experienced normal parental care. They never learned how to establish territories, how to raise offspring, or even how to interact with other mice in healthy ways. Each new generation inherited a society that was less stable than the one before it. The colony had entered a vicious cycle. As social behavior deteriorated, fewer young mice learned the skills needed to sustain the population. And with every generation, recovery became less likely. By this point, Universe 25 was no longer the paradise it had once appeared to be. The physical environment remained almost perfect, but the social world inside it was quietly falling apart. The worst was still yet to come.
As the colony continued to decline, the damage became impossible to ignore. Birth rates fell steadily. Fewer females became pregnant. Fewer pups were born. More nests remained empty. For the first time since the experiment began, the population stopped growing. Then it began to shrink. The Beautiful Ones became increasingly common. They spent their lives eating, sleeping, and endlessly grooming their spotless fur. Physically, they appeared healthy, but they showed little interest in mating, defending territory, or raising young. They had withdrawn almost completely from the society around them. To Calhoun, this marked the final stage of behavioral collapse. The mice were still capable of surviving as individuals, but they were no longer behaving in ways that allowed their society to survive.
As older mice died, there were too few young to replace them. The colony grew older month after month. Yet nothing about the environment had changed. Food remained unlimited, fresh water was always available. The temperature stayed comfortable. No epidemic swept through the enclosure, no predator appeared. The paradise itself still existed. Only the society
had collapsed. Calhoun later attempted to move some surviving mice into less crowded environments. If overcrowding had been the only problem, this should have given them a chance to recover. But many never returned to normal behavior. Even in a safer, quieter environment, they showed little interest in mating or raising offspring. Those that had grown up during the colony's collapse seemed unable to rebuild the social behaviors their parents had lost. For many researchers, this suggested that once social structures had broken down beyond a certain point, simply improving the environment was not enough to reverse the damage.
Eventually, the outcome became inevitable. No new pups were born. The remaining mice simply grew older. One by one, they died of old age. Until finally, the last mouse was gone. Universe 25 had come to an end. There had been no famine, no deadly disease, no natural disaster, no outside enemy. The colony possessed everything required for physical survival, yet it still disappeared. When Calhoun published his findings, the experiment attracted worldwide attention. Many newspapers described it as a warning for modern civilization. Some even claimed it had predicted humanity's future. As birth rates declined in many developed countries and concerns about loneliness and social isolation grew, people began comparing human society to Universe 25. The beautiful ones became a symbol of a population that had lost its sense of purpose. But many scientists argued that these comparisons went too far. After all, the experiment involved mice, not humans.
More importantly, the mice lived in a sealed enclosure. They couldn't migrate. They couldn't establish new communities. They couldn't change the rules of their society. Humans, by contrast, can adapt. We build new cities, develop new technologies, create new institutions, and reshape our cultures over time. Because of these differences, most researchers do not regard Universe 25 as a prediction of humanity's future. Instead, they see it as an experiment that revealed how complex social behavior can become under extreme conditions. More than half a century later, Universe 25 continues to spark debate. Some view it as a warning. Others believe it has been widely misunderstood. Perhaps the experiment's greatest lesson is not that humanity is destined to follow the same path. Rather, it reminds us that a healthy society depends on far more than abundant resources. It also depends on meaningful relationships, stable communities, shared responsibilities, and the ability to adapt as circumstances change. So perhaps the real question isn't whether Universe 25 predicted our future. It's this: if humanity ever creates a world where every material need is met, will we also preserve the social bonds that make civilization possible? More than 50 years later, that question still has no definitive answer. And that is why Universe 25 remains one of the most fascinating and controversial behavioral experiments ever conducted.